Ladies and gentlemen, we all know what it feels like to be isolated, don't we? Whether it's in a crowded room where we feel like we don't belong, or in our own thoughts where silence can sometimes be louder than any sound. But isolation is not always a physical state. Sometimes it's a deep emotional feeling, a barrier between us and the world. But what are the reasons behind this isolation? Why do we find ourselves withdrawing from others, even when we crave connection? Isolation doesn't always come from the lack of people around us. It can stem from fear, the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. Often we build walls around ourselves, thinking that if we don't let anyone in, they won't have the chance to hurt us. But here's the truth: we are not meant to live in isolation. We are wired for connection. Sometimes the reason for isolation is within ourselves. We might feel inadequate, believing that we don't deserve to be loved, understood, or appreciated. We begin to convince ourselves that the world would be better off without us, that no one truly cares. But let me tell you something: your value is not determined by your doubts or by how you perceive others see you. Isolation also comes from experiences of loss, losing someone we love, or even losing a part of ourselves. In these moments, it feels easier to withdraw from everything and everyone. It's easier to stay silent, to hide our pain, to pretend everything is okay. But in those moments, we need to remind ourselves that it's okay to not be okay. Healing requires connection, vulnerability, and sometimes reaching out for help. The external world also plays a role in fostering isolation. In a society that often prioritizes appearance over authenticity, we sometimes feel like we must hide our true selves in order to fit in. Social media, though meant to connect us, can often leave us feeling even more distant. We compare ourselves to others, think we are not good enough, and so we isolate ourselves further, afraid of being judged or misunderstood. But there's beauty in our imperfections, and there's strength in reaching out. Sometimes we feel isolated because we are waiting for others to see us, to approach us, to break down our walls. But often, the most powerful thing we can do is to take that first step ourselves. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is a testament to our strength. It's not about being perfect, but about being real. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that being alone is safer, that it's easier to live in isolation. But remember, true courage lies in allowing yourself to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. It's about embracing your worth, no matter how you've been treated in the past. You are not your scars, you are not your failures, you are not your doubts. You are more than the isolation you may feel right now. So today I want to ask each of you, what's keeping you isolated? Is it fear? Is it doubt? Is it a past hurt? Whatever it is, know that you have the strength to rise above it. You are worthy of connection. You are worthy of love. And most importantly, you are worthy of belonging. Take a deep breath, open your heart, let others in, and most importantly, let yourself feel the warmth of the world around you. The first step towards breaking isolation is believing that you deserve to be a part of something bigger than yourself. We all do. Fear of judgment is one of the most powerful forces that can push us into isolation. It is a deeply ingrained emotion that affects the way we interact with others, the way we view ourselves, and the way we engage with the world. When we are afraid of being judged, we often choose to stay silent, withdraw, or present a version of ourselves that we think will be more acceptable to others. This fear is not just about external criticism, it is also about internalized beliefs that we are not enough or that we are somehow flawed. This fear of judgment is often rooted in early experiences. From a young age, we are taught to conform to certain societal expectations, and we quickly learn to fear the consequences of stepping out of line. Whether it's in school, in our families, or among our peers, we learn that being different can invite criticism, exclusion, or even ridicule. These early experiences shape our perception of what is acceptable and what is not, leaving us with a constant sense of unease about how others perceive us. As we grow older, this fear only intensifies. The pressure to fit in, to be liked, to succeed in ways that others deem valuable becomes overwhelming. We begin to believe that if we don't meet these standards, we will be judged harshly or, worse, ignored altogether. This fear manifests in many ways: avoiding social situations, hiding aspects of ourselves, pretending to be someone we're not, and suppressing our true feelings. In extreme cases, it can lead to complete withdrawal. where we isolate ourselves from the world entirely because we feel that no one will accept us for who we truly are. The fear of judgment is also deeply tied to our sense of self-worth. When we tie our value to the opinions of others, we place ourselves in a vulnerable position. If others approve of us, we feel good about ourselves. But if they criticize or reject us, our self-esteem takes a hit. This constant fluctuation between feeling accepted and feeling rejected can create a cycle of anxiety and self-doubt. The more we fear judgment, the more we seek validation, and the more we seek validation, the more vulnerable we become to the effects of others' opinions. In today's world, the fear of judgment is amplified by social media. The platforms that are meant to connect us often create a culture of comparison, where we constantly measure ourselves against others. We post carefully curated images of our lives, showing only the highlights and hiding the messiness. We begin to believe that if our lives don't look perfect, if we don't present a version of ourselves that is attractive, successful, or happy, we will be judged as failures. Social media gives us the illusion of connection, but in reality, it often reinforces our fear of judgment by making us feel inadequate. We measure our worth by the number of likes, comments, and followers we have, and this can distort our perception of who we really are. The fear of judgment also makes us reluctant to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is the act of exposing our true selves, our thoughts, and our emotions without the fear of rejection or ridicule. It requires us to let down our guard and be open to connection with others, even when there's a risk that we might be judged. But vulnerability is one of the most powerful ways to overcome fear. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create authentic connections with others, and we allow ourselves to be seen for who we truly are. The problem is that for many of us, the fear of judgment is so strong that we are unwilling to take that risk. We hide behind masks of perfection, crafting a version of ourselves that we think others will accept, while suppressing our true emotions, thoughts, and desires. This fear also prevents us from taking risks or pursuing things that matter to us. We hold back from expressing our creativity, sharing our ideas, or following our passions because we fear that others will criticize us or judge us as incompetent. The fear of judgment stifles our growth, limiting our potential and preventing us from fully experiencing life. We become paralyzed by the thought of what others might think, and in doing so, we miss out on the opportunities that could help us discover who we really are and what we are capable of. Another way in which the fear of judgment affects us is in the way we judge others. When we are constantly worried about how others perceive us, we project those same fears onto them. We become hyper-aware of their reactions, wondering if they approve of us, if they like us, or if they are secretly judging us. This creates a sense of competition or comparison that makes it difficult to form genuine connections. Instead of focusing on building relationships based on trust and understanding, we focus on performing for others, trying to meet their expectations and worrying about their opinions. This cycle can lead to loneliness and isolation because at the end of the day, we are not connecting with others on a deep and authentic level. We are simply trying to meet external standards that are often unrealistic or imposed upon us. The impact of fear of judgment on mental health cannot be overstated. Constantly worrying about how we are perceived can lead to anxiety, depression, and feelings of inadequacy. We internalize the judgments of others even when they are not voiced and begin to believe that we are not worthy of love, respect, or attention. This negative self-talk becomes ingrained in our minds, reinforcing the isolation we feel. We convince ourselves that no one will ever understand us or accept us for who we are. As a result, we retreat even further into ourselves, avoiding social interactions and withdrawing from the world around us. Overcoming the fear of judgment is not easy. It requires a shift in perspective, a willingness to accept ourselves as we are, and the courage to be vulnerable. It means understanding that we cannot control how others perceive us, and that their opinions do not define our worth. It also means embracing our imperfections and recognizing that they are part of what makes us human. When we let go of the fear of judgment, we open ourselves to deeper connections, greater self-acceptance, and a richer, more fulfilling life. It's important to remember that the fear of judgment is a natural human response. We all experience it to some degree, but it doesn't have to control us. By acknowledging it, understanding its roots, and taking small steps to face it head-on, we can begin to break free from its grip. The more we allow ourselves to be seen, the more we realize that our true selves are enough. The fear of judgment may always be there, but we don't have to let it isolate us. External pressures are a significant factor that can drive individuals into isolation. These pressures come in many forms, and they often stem from the expectations placed on us by society, family, friends, and even ourselves. The weight of these expectations can be overwhelming, creating a sense of inadequacy and forcing us to hide parts of ourselves in order to conform. Whether it's the pressure to succeed professionally, the expectation to adhere to certain social norms, or the need to meet the standards of beauty and success set by popular culture, external pressures have the power to isolate us emotionally, mentally, and physically. From an early age, we are conditioned by society to measure our worth according to certain standards. These standards might include academic achievement, career success, physical appearance, and the ability to maintain certain social connections. Society often tells us that we must strive for perfection, that we must fit into a mold that defines what it means to be successful, attractive, or socially acceptable. In this environment, those who do not meet these expectations can feel like outsiders, as though they are not measuring up in ways that matter most. This sense of falling short can be isolating, leading us to question our worth and withdraw from social interactions that might highlight our perceived failures. The pressure to succeed in one's career is one of the most pervasive forms of external pressure in modern society. From the moment we enter the workforce, we are bombarded with messages that tell us success is defined by how much we earn, how high we climb on the corporate ladder, or how much recognition we gain. Our professional lives are often seen as a reflection of our abilities, our ambition, and our value as individuals. This constant drive for success can lead to stress, burnout, and a feeling of emptiness when the goals we've worked so hard to achieve don't bring the happiness or fulfillment we expected. When we don't reach these professional milestones, the fear of being judged or seen as a failure can push us further into isolation as we distance ourselves from others who seem to be thriving in their careers. For many, the pressure to conform to certain societal norms adds another layer of complexity to their sense of identity. Social media amplifies these pressures, creating an environment where everyone is constantly comparing their lives to the curated, idealized versions that others present. The expectation to look a certain way, to dress in a particular style, or to live a life that seems perfect can create a sense of inadequacy. We may feel compelled to maintain a facade of perfection, hiding our insecurities and flaws behind a carefully crafted image. This can be exhausting, and the constant need to perform for others can eventually lead to feelings of isolation. We may begin to believe that we are not enough as we are, and that our true selves are not worthy of acceptance. This belief can create a divide between us and others, as we hide parts of ourselves, fearing that revealing our true selves will lead to judgment or rejection. Family expectations also play a significant role in driving people into isolation. From childhood through adulthood, many individuals are subjected to the beliefs and values that their families hold dear. These expectations can often conflict with one's personal desires or identity. For example, a child may be pushed into a particular career path that their parents deem successful, even if it does not align with the child's own passions or interests. In other cases, families may place pressure on individuals to marry, have children, or fulfill other cultural or traditional roles, even if these life choices do not align with the individual's desires. The fear of disappointing one's family can be overwhelming, causing individuals to suppress their own desires and needs in order to meet expectations that feel burdensome. This suppression often leads to isolation, as the individual may feel they can't share their true feelings or pursue their authentic path without facing criticism or judgment. Another form of external pressure is the societal expectation to be constantly busy or productive. In a world where success is often equated with constant hustle and achievement, there is little room for rest, reflection, or simply being. The culture of busyness creates an environment where individuals are expected to always be working, achieving, and improving without acknowledging the need for downtime, self-care, or emotional processing. This pressure can make individuals feel guilty for taking time for themselves or for experiencing moments of vulnerability. The fear of being seen as lazy, unproductive, or unambitious can lead people to isolate themselves as they avoid interacting with others out of a sense of shame or fear of judgment. The constant drive to do more can prevent individuals from engaging with their feelings, resulting in emotional numbness and a deepening sense of disconnection from others. The pressure to maintain certain relationships also contributes to the isolation that many people feel. Social connections are often seen as an essential part of life, and there is an expectation to maintain a wide network of friends and acquaintances. However, not all relationships are healthy or fulfilling. The pressure to keep up appearances or maintain relationships for the sake of social status can cause individuals to stay in relationships that don't align with their values or that drain their energy. These toxic relationships, whether they are with family, friends, or romantic partners, can make individuals feel trapped and isolated. The fear of being alone or rejected by others can keep people in relationships that are not nurturing or supportive, further exacerbating feelings of loneliness and disconnection. In addition to external pressures, internalized beliefs about what it means to be successful or acceptable can make it difficult to reach out for help or support. When we internalize the belief that we must meet certain standards, we may feel that asking for help is a sign of weakness or failure. We may fear that others will judge us for not being able to handle our problems on our own, or for not living up to the expectations we have set for ourselves. This fear of vulnerability can make it difficult to open up to others, even those who are well-meaning and supportive. The more we internalize the need to meet external standards, the more isolated we become, as we close ourselves off from the very connections that could offer comfort, understanding, and healing. The impact of external pressures on mental health cannot be underestimated. The constant stress of trying to meet societal expectations, professional goals, and family demands can lead to anxiety, depression, and burnout. Individuals who feel they are constantly falling short of these expectations may begin to believe they are not enough, which can erode their self-esteem and sense of worth. The more they isolate themselves in an attempt to protect their vulnerability, the more they feel disconnected from the world around them, leading to a vicious cycle of self-doubt and emotional withdrawal. Ultimately, the external pressures that contribute to isolation are not always visible to those around us. Society often praises those who meet these expectations, whether through professional success, social status, or personal achievements, without acknowledging the mental and emotional toll these pressures take. As a result, many individuals suffer in silence, feeling like they are the only ones who can't keep up or meet the demands of the world. The fear of being seen as inadequate or weak prevents them from reaching out for support or opening up to others. In this way, external pressures not only isolate individuals but also perpetuate the belief that they must face their struggles alone. In many cases, a lack of support or understanding from others can drive individuals into isolation. Human beings are social creatures, and the need for connection is one of the most fundamental aspects of our existence. When we experience difficult emotions, face challenges, or struggle with our own thoughts and feelings, it is the support of others that can help us navigate through these times. However, when that support is absent, either because others are unable to offer it or because we feel misunderstood, the resulting loneliness can be incredibly isolating. The absence of empathy or the feeling that no one truly understands what we're going through can push us into a place of solitude where we withdraw not because we want to, but because we feel that no one will be able to offer us the understanding or validation we need. One of the most profound ways in which a lack of support manifests is when individuals are dealing with mental health struggles. In a society where mental health is often stigmatized or misunderstood, those who face depression, anxiety, or other mental health challenges may feel reluctant to open up to others. The fear of being judged or misunderstood can prevent individuals from reaching out, and this leads to a deepening sense of isolation. People may not fully grasp the complexity of mental health issues, often simplifying them or offering advice that can feel dismissive. Well-intentioned but misguided remarks such as "just think positive" or "snap out of it" can leave a person feeling even more alienated. These comments, although they may come from a place of concern, fail to acknowledge the intricacies of mental health struggles and can make the person feel that they are alone in their experiences. In the absence of genuine understanding, individuals may retreat inward, withdrawing from the very people who could potentially offer them the emotional support they need. Similarly, when people face significant life challenges such as a personal loss, a difficult breakup, financial difficulties, or trauma, the support they receive from others plays a crucial role in how they navigate these struggles. However, many people find that instead of offering comfort, others either distance themselves or offer superficial solutions that don't address the depth of the pain. The fear of saying the wrong thing or a lack of empathy can create an emotional distance between individuals. Friends and family may not know how to respond to someone in distress, and this uncertainty can lead to avoidance. The person experiencing the difficulty, feeling unsupported, can start to believe that they are burdening others with their problems, leading them to withdraw even further. This sense of being a burden, coupled with the feeling that no one truly understands, can foster feelings of loneliness and drive a person into isolation, even though they may desperately need connection. The lack of emotional support can also be particularly damaging when it comes from those closest to us. Relationships with family members, close friends, or romantic partners are supposed to be a source of understanding and comfort. However, when these relationships are strained, or when those we trust the most fail to provide the support we need, the impact can be devastating. In these cases, it is not only the lack of support that causes isolation, but also the feelings of betrayal, abandonment, or emotional neglect. If a person turns to their partner, parent, or friend for comfort and is met with indifference, criticism, or avoidance, they may begin to question their worth and feel like they are not deserving of love or care. This lack of empathy or understanding can make them feel disconnected not just from the person they expected to support them, but from everyone else around them as well. The emotional hurt from these relationships can be so deep that it causes them to shut down, withdrawing into isolation as a form of self-protection. Sometimes the isolation stemming from a lack of support is not due to the absence of people around us, but because the people we encounter fail to provide the emotional connection we need. For instance, in a world that is increasingly digital, many people find themselves surrounded by thousands of social media followers or online acquaintances, yet still feel incredibly alone. Self-doubt is a deeply ingrained emotion that often serves as a powerful catalyst for isolation. It is the quiet whisper that undermines our confidence, suggesting that we are not worthy of love, attention, or success. This internal dialogue can be so pervasive that it shapes the way we view the world and ourselves. When self-doubt takes root, it creates a barrier between us and the outside world, causing us to withdraw from others and retreat into a shell of insecurity. We begin to believe that we are not enough, that no matter how hard we try, we will never meet the standards of others or even our own expectations. This feeling of inadequacy can be isolating, leading us to seek solace in solitude, where we convince ourselves that hiding is safer than facing potential rejection. The origins of self-doubt often lie in the messages we receive throughout our lives. From childhood, we are taught to strive for perfection. Whether it's the praise we receive for achieving high marks in school, the approval of others when we meet certain milestones, or the subtle hints of disappointment when we fall short, we learn that our value is tied to external validation. Over time, these messages become internalized. We begin to define ourselves by our successes and failures, linking our worth to what we accomplish or how we are perceived by others. As a result, every misstep becomes a reflection of our inadequacy, and every failure reinforces the belief that we are not good enough. In adulthood, the pressure to measure up only intensifies. We are bombarded with images of success, perfection, and happiness through social media, advertising, and even the people around us. These external pressures create an unrealistic standard of what it means to be successful or worthy. When we inevitably fall short of these standards, we are left with a sense of inadequacy that fuels our self-doubt. We wonder why we can't achieve the same level of success as others, why we don't look as put together, or why our lives don't seem as perfect. The more we compare ourselves to others, the more our self-doubt grows, leading us further into isolation. We begin to feel like an outsider, convinced that everyone else has it figured out while we are left struggling to keep up. Self-doubt also feeds on our fears of rejection and judgment. The fear of not being accepted for who we truly are often leads us to suppress our authentic selves in favor of a more palatable version that we believe others will approve of. This fear of rejection is particularly powerful because it taps into our deep need for connection and belonging. When we feel that we are not enough, we start to distance ourselves from others. We convince ourselves that if people really knew us, they would not accept us. This belief can be so strong that we avoid social interactions altogether, choosing instead to remain in the comfort of our own isolation where we can shield ourselves from potential harm. The internal battle of self-doubt can manifest in various forms. It can appear as a constant inner critic telling us that we are not smart enough, talented enough, or deserving enough. It may cause us to second-guess our decisions, overthink every interaction, and replay our mistakes in our minds over and over again. This cycle of self-criticism can be mentally exhausting, and the longer it persists, the more difficult it becomes to break free. As a result, we begin to feel trapped in our own negative thought patterns, unable to see our own worth or potential. One of the most insidious aspects of self-doubt is that it can be self-perpetuating. The more we doubt ourselves, the less likely we are to take risks or pursue opportunities. We become afraid of failure and avoid putting ourselves in situations where we might not succeed. This creates a cycle where our lack of confidence prevents us from trying new things, which in turn reinforces our belief that we are not capable. Over time, this avoidance becomes a coping mechanism, but it also deepens our sense of isolation. We convince ourselves that we are not good enough to join in, to pursue our passions, or to take a chance on something new. And so we retreat further into ourselves, avoiding situations where we might face the possibility of failure or judgment. Self-doubt also affects the way we relate to others. When we feel insecure, we may struggle to trust the people around us or believe that they truly value us. We may question their motives or wonder if they are only pretending to like us, all because we are convinced that we are not worthy of their attention or affection. This distrust can lead to feelings of loneliness and disconnection as we push others away in an effort to protect ourselves from the hurt that we fear will come from being vulnerable. We start to believe that no one can truly love or accept us for who we are, and this belief isolates us from the very relationships that could provide the support and validation we need to heal. The fear of judgment that accompanies self-doubt also affects our ability to express ourselves authentically. When we don't feel confident in who we are, we often try to conform to the expectations of others. We may suppress our true thoughts, feelings, and desires in order to fit in or avoid standing out. This can lead to a sense of disconnection from ourselves and from those around us. But we may feel like we are living a life that isn't true to who we are, but we stay silent because we fear that expressing our true selves will lead to rejection. Over time, this can create a deep sense of loneliness and isolation as we hide behind a facade of what we think others want us to be, rather than embracing who we really are. Overcoming self-doubt is not an easy task. It requires a fundamental shift in the way we view ourselves and the way we relate to the world. One of the first steps in overcoming self-doubt is to recognize that it is a natural part of the human experience. Everyone experiences moments of self-doubt, and it is important to acknowledge that these feelings do not define us. They are simply temporary thoughts and emotions that do not reflect our true worth or potential. By challenging these negative thoughts and replacing them with more positive and empowering beliefs, we can begin to break free from the grip of self-doubt. Another important step in overcoming self-doubt is learning to embrace vulnerability. Vulnerability is the courage to show up and be seen, even when we feel insecure or imperfect. It is the willingness to take risks, to put ourselves out there, and to trust that we are worthy of love and acceptance, even in our most imperfect moments. Embracing vulnerability means accepting that we may not always succeed or meet the expectations of others, but it also means recognizing that our worth is not defined by these outcomes. It is in our willingness to be vulnerable that we open ourselves to deeper connections and greater self-acceptance. Taking small steps to build confidence is another key aspect of overcoming self-doubt. By setting achievable goals and celebrating our successes, no matter how small, we can begin to shift our focus from our perceived failures to our accomplishments. Over time, this shift in perspective can help us build a more positive and realistic view of ourselves, reinforcing our belief in our abilities and potential. It is also important to surround ourselves with supportive people who uplift and encourage us. Positive relationships provide a sense of belonging and help counter the negative voices of self-doubt. By seeking out people who accept us for who we are, we can begin to heal and rebuild our self-esteem. These relationships remind us that we are not alone in our struggles and that we are worthy of love, support, and acceptance just as we are. Loss and grief are among the most profound experiences that can lead to isolation. When we experience loss, whether it's the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, or even the loss of a sense of identity, something within us shifts. We may feel as though the ground beneath us has been pulled away, leaving us struggling to find our place in a world that no longer feels the same. In these moments, the pain of loss can be so overwhelming that it becomes difficult to connect with others or even with ourselves. Grief, in its many forms, often triggers a deep sense of isolation, not because we are physically alone, but because the emotional weight of our pain creates an invisible barrier between us and the world. The experience of loss can lead us to question everything we once knew. We might feel disoriented, as though the world we understood has shifted into something unrecognizable. This sense of disconnection can make us feel as though no one else understands what we're going through. While others may offer sympathy or comfort, it often feels like their words fall short of capturing the depth of our sorrow. In these moments, we may retreat inward, thinking that no one can truly understand our pain. This isolation often stems from the belief that our grief is uniquely ours, something that no one else can experience in the same way, which creates a barrier between us and others. In the early stages of grief, it's common to withdraw from social interactions. We may avoid seeing friends or family, not because we don't care for them, but because the emotional burden of grief feels too heavy to share. In these moments, we may not have the energy to engage in small talk or to maintain the social masks that we once wore. The world continues to move around us, but it feels as though we are standing still, unable to keep up with the pace of life. In this state, isolation feels like a natural response, a way to protect ourselves from the overwhelming emotions that come with loss. We may feel ashamed of our sadness or afraid that others will not know how to handle our pain, so we withdraw further into ourselves. The isolation caused by grief can also lead to a sense of alienation. When we experience loss, we often find ourselves in a space that no one else around us seems to occupy. The world moves forward while we remain stuck in a moment of profound sadness and confusion. Others may try to comfort us, but they may not fully understand the depth of our grief. They may offer advice such as time heals all wounds or everything happens for a reason, but these well-meaning words can sometimes feel dismissive or even hurtful. The truth is, no one can truly understand the unique way in which we grieve, and this realization can lead us to feel as though we are alone in our experience, disconnected from those around us who seem to be moving on with their lives. In many cases, grief can lead to a loss of identity. When we lose someone or something that was a central part of our lives, we often find ourselves questioning who we are without that person or thing. This can create a sense of disorientation, as though our very sense of self has been shaken to its core. We may feel as though we no longer know who we are or what our purpose is. This loss of identity can make it even more difficult to connect with others, as we may feel like a shell of our former selves. The isolation that accompanies grief is often compounded by this loss of identity, as we struggle to find our place in a world that feels fundamentally changed. Additionally, grief can bring with it a deep sense of guilt. We may feel guilty for not being able to save the person we lost, or guilty for moving on with our lives in the wake of their passing. This guilt can weigh heavily on our hearts, creating a sense of isolation that is rooted in self-blame. We may believe that by retreating into isolation, we are somehow honoring the memory of our loved ones, or that we are protecting ourselves from the pain of their absence. However, in doing so, we often cut ourselves off from the very connections that could help us heal. The guilt that accompanies loss can make it difficult to seek support, as we may feel unworthy of comfort or unable to let go of our grief. For some, the isolation caused by grief is compounded by a fear of burdening others. We may not want to burden our friends or family with our pain, so we choose to keep it to ourselves. We may fear that by expressing our grief, we will be seen as weak, or that our loved ones will not know how to handle our emotions. Self-doubt is an internal force that can deeply contribute to feelings of isolation. This pervasive feeling often comes from a deep-seated fear of inadequacy, or the belief that we are not worthy of success, love, or connection. It's a quiet voice in our minds that constantly questions our actions, decisions, and abilities. When we struggle with self-doubt, it becomes difficult to trust ourselves or others, creating emotional barriers that isolate us from the world around us. The more we question ourselves, the more we withdraw from others, not because we necessarily want to, but because we are afraid of being judged or rejected for not measuring up. One of the most insidious aspects of self-doubt is that it tends to be self-perpetuating. The more we doubt ourselves, the more we become convinced that others will do the same. This belief leads to a fear of vulnerability, where we hide our true selves in order to protect ourselves from potential rejection. We may avoid opening up to others, fearing that if we expose our insecurities, they will see us as weak or flawed. This fear of being exposed, of revealing parts of ourselves that we think are unworthy or broken, keeps us trapped in a cycle of isolation. Even in the presence of loved ones, we may feel distant or disconnected because we are not allowing ourselves to be fully authentic. This emotional distance creates a rift between ourselves and those around us, even though the people in our lives may want to connect and offer support. Self-doubt often leads us to engage in negative self-talk, where we focus on our perceived shortcomings or failures rather than our strengths and accomplishments. This internal dialogue can be incredibly damaging, as it reinforces the belief that we are incapable or unworthy. When we constantly tell ourselves that we are not good enough or that we will never succeed, we begin to believe it. The more we internalize these negative messages, the more we retreat into ourselves, isolating ourselves from the very support systems that could help us challenge these beliefs. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more we doubt ourselves, the more we pull away from others, and the more isolated we become. In this state, it becomes difficult to see the value we have to offer, and we may begin to feel as though we are invisible or insignificant. The fear of failure is another manifestation of self-doubt that often leads to isolation. When we believe that failure is inevitable or that we are destined to fall short, we may avoid taking risks or putting ourselves in situations where we could potentially fail. This fear of failure not only prevents us from pursuing our goals or dreams, but it also keeps us from fully participating in our relationships or engaging with others on a deeper level. We might avoid social situations because we fear making a mistake or saying the wrong thing, or we might refrain from asking for help because we believe that doing so would expose our incompetence. This avoidance of vulnerability, driven by the fear of failure, further isolates us from others, leaving us trapped in a self-imposed bubble of self-doubt and isolation. Another way in which self-doubt fosters isolation is by preventing us from seeking the support we need. When we struggle with feelings of inadequacy, it becomes difficult to believe that anyone would want to help us or that we deserve support. We may feel like a burden to others, thinking that our struggles are too much for them to handle. This belief can prevent us from reaching out to friends, family, or even professionals for help. We may convince ourselves that others have their own problems and that we should deal with ours on our own. This isolation can be incredibly damaging, as it deprives us of the comfort and perspective that others could offer. In our darkest moments, it is easy to convince ourselves that we are alone, and this belief makes it even harder to take the first step toward reaching out. Self-doubt can also create an emotional barrier in our relationships. When we feel insecure or unworthy, we may push others away in an attempt to protect ourselves from potential rejection. We may fear that if we let our guard down, others will see us as flawed or inadequate. As a result, we may withdraw emotionally from those we care about, keeping our true feelings hidden and not allowing ourselves to be fully vulnerable. This emotional distance can create a sense of isolation even within close relationships. Our partners, friends, or family members may sense that something is wrong but may not know how to break through the barrier we've created. The more we retreat inward, the more we begin to feel disconnected from those we love, and the more isolated we become.